We've done the tier lists. They're out there for everyone to see. But they are in isolation. And what happens when we bring it all together? What hero wants what weapon and what imprint? Well, over the course of the next 2 videos, I'm going to break that down for you. We'll talk a little bit about best in slot and then perhaps some other quirky little synergies to consider, not just from now, but when the game is out there for everyone. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hello everyone, Ragewood here, back with another Godforge video, and yes, as we said in the intro, we are going to be going through all of the legendary heroes, and I'm going to be talking about what weapons and imprints that I like on them. Now, some of them will be best in slot, if you want to call it that. Others will be just options that I think synergize with their kit if you can't get the best in slot item. And in fact, there's a few of them where I don't think that there is a definitive best in slot. So that'll be down to you to make a decision based on the information that we all have. Now, this is going to be a 2-part video to keep the length of it down more than anything. And there's something that needs to be spoken about before we jump into anything. So the caveats are, firstly, this is an opinion piece like everything else I've done. A few of you seem to appreciate my opinion, which is nice to see, and, thank you for the positive words. But if you disagree with me, that is fine. You're allowed to do that. Doesn't mean that I'm right, doesn't mean that you're wrong. Once again, an opinion piece. Secondly, some of the best in slot weapons might be epics. I can think of one off the top of my head, and it's actually the first hero we're going to come to. That does not mean you should be picking an epic weapon from the minigame. Legendary weapons are going to be very hard to come by, okay? And therefore, even if it's not maybe the perfect choice for the legendary that you end up with, I still recommend taking a legendary weapon or even imprint, just because they're simply going to be harder to come by. Now, I'm going to be talking about all levels of imprints and weapons, including rare imprints. The reason for this is you are joining with maybe like less than a week to go of this event. I still want this to have some use for you. Now, I do not recommend you take a rare imprint over a legendary one, but if time is short and you've only come for a couple of days, you just want something that might pair well with something that you've got, then hopefully this will give you a little bit of insight. And then lastly, common weapons and imprints that are just good on everyone, objectively. For the most part, for example, if we look at epic weapons, you're not going to hear me talk too much about Golden Bow, Imalu, and Spartan Shield. And I'll put them up on screen here very quickly, just so you can see what they do. Golden Bow, in my opinion, is very clearly the best epic weapon for any damage dealer, just period. The reason for it is, particularly early on, getting max crit rate is going to be quite hard. And even at level 1, this giving you 10% is good. And that's not even considering the lifesteal you're going to get as well. Then as you level it up, you'll get more crit rate, which is just happy days. And again, this might be what allows you to move from crit rate gloves to crit damage gloves, just as an example. So for any damage dealer, this is great. Imalu. Ultimates do more damage. Again, I don't need to tell you why that's good. If you've got no other option or nothing that really works and your ultimate does damage, this is good. Again, I don't need to go into more detail why. Same with Spartan Shield, making something more effective, speed bonus, defensive bonus, again, is just gravy, all right? So, again, not going to worry too much about that. When it comes to imprints, as I was filling out my little spreadsheet here just of ideas, there were quite a few legendaries, epics, and rares. We're going to go over all 3 that sort of, I put in an awful lot of them just because, again, they're just generically good. Wukong is the obvious one, whether it's someone who's like really focused on their basic attack or not. The 2-turn immortal is just nice to have on everyone. So if you don't hear me talk about them, it's not necessarily because I've forgotten them. I just want to make it very clear that the Wukong legendary imprint is probably all around the best one, just generally. All right. So again, don't at me in the comments if I don't specifically talk about it. The same for Fujin. Now this is an interesting one, but just having a damage reduction. I know it's only AoE, so it can be quite narrow in single target fights, for example. But again, I'm not going to focus too much about this just because just having damage reduction of any sort is just nice. Okay, so again, I haven't left it, I haven't forgotten it. It's there. Okay. Epic imprint wise, things that I found myself going over again: Osiris's imprint, Green Knight's imprint, and Zolotl. And once again, you should see it all on screen. Uh, More damage and then damage reduction with Osiris is great. Reflecting damage with Green Knight is also nice. And Zolotl, it's similar to Wukong. A chance to follow up attack, even though it's low, is nice. But also the heal baked into it is very good. Now, there is only 1 or 2 heroes that I will specifically talk about Zolotl. And yeah, that would be great. And then lastly, from the rares. Now, the rares, it's very slim pickings. And again, I'm not saying you should pick these over a legendary. First one is Nitocris. At the start of your turn, you steal 5% divinity from the enemy with the highest turn meter. It's just value for not really doing anything. Tengu, I quite like. Attacks have a small chance to decrease enemy turn meter. Now, it's not a huge number, but for those of you who have played Raid, at least on my account, it was quite a common thing I chose early on in the mastery side of things, so that could be quite nice. Ceridwin, I think, is particularly good on support units, damage reduction, or damage scaling, depending on how you've built your team. And then Ceres, just the chance, random chance, and small, to just get an extra turn. Again, it's just quite nice. So again, you might not hear me talk too much about those. One other thing specifically to mention is the Thunderbolt weapon. Now, if I ever mention the Thunderbolt weapon, chances are I'm looking at pairing it with the Wukong Imprint, mainly because a lot of players or units don't have follow-up attack. Wukong gives them a chance to do that, and when they do that, the Thunderbolt increases the turn meter and divinity. So again, if I don't go into too much detail on what imprint to pair with Thunderbolt, if I just mention Thunderbolt, assume that I'm going to put the Wukong imprint on. So then one more thing. I'm not going to have this up on screen all the time, all right, but I want to give a shout out to Stormcrow. He is a member of ELT. He put this little spreadsheet together with all the updated info on the heroes. Now, I'm going to be working down in alphabetical order, and to save me from jumping around in all the different videos to look at the different kits and things, I'm just going to be referring back to this. So thank you, Stormcrow, for giving me permission to use this and for putting it together. I appreciate you. Hopefully, in the not too distant future, we will have the info on the Godforge GG website. I'm also going to try and keep every hero to 3 minutes or less so I can make this as short for you guys if you guys don't want to watch the entire thing. If I've done my job right, you'll start seeing shorts come out very soon as well on these units, so do bear that in mind. Anubis then, he is a brawler, and his kit is all around control and debuffs. His basic hits 2 times. If he kills someone, he places Despair. His core places Corrupt and Initiative down. And then his ultimate will either give him a barrier or a heal, depending on what his HP threshold is at. So weapons-wise, Thunderbolt with Wukong, if you like that kind of thing. You can even go with Aegis, Forge Fire, or eventually Makahital, although Makahital probably later when you've been able to level it up. Forge Fire is nice because Anubis is a HP-based champion. Giving him damage reduction is just going to make him harder to kill. The Huntress weapon I also really like, and I actually think potentially might be the best weapon for him. The Huntress weapon says you decrease the turn meter whenever you place a disable. Now, he places team-wide fear if you kill someone, so being able to decrease the turn meter when you place that disable, you're just going to get more value out of it in my mind. You're slowing them down somewhat. And specifically, if we're using the Huntress weapon, I like the Perrin imprint as well. They've got quite a nice pairing, and you're going to see that quite a lot throughout this little series. When it comes to legendary imprints for Anubis specifically, ones I like are the Morrigan, increasing the duration of your corrupt and initiative down, Vivian to increase the damage of your basic attack to give you more chance to get the kill, as well as things like Oda, for example, increasing your damage when you kill people. Grendel, the lower HP you get more speed and initiative. He is a brawler, he's very tanky. You're gonna benefit quite a bit from that. When it comes to epic imprints, as we've already mentioned previously, Osiris and Xolotl, but also Persephone. Now, Persephone says when someone receives a debuff, you reduce their divinity. Now, this is quite nice because, especially if you pair it with Huntress weapon, for example, you've got turn meter reduction and you've got divinity reduction sort of paired in there quite nicely. So if you don't take the Perrin imprint, Persephone might be more of a budget option for you that I quite like. Rare imprints, when it comes to those, there's a couple that I quite like. Nitocris, as we've spoken about in the prelude. If you haven't watched that, go back and watch that. Lubu I quite like because you do more damage when you're under barrier. His ultimate will place barrier. And then Eurydice and Volkodlak. Now, Eurydice says when an enemy under a disable takes their turn, you reduce their divinity, and Volkodlak lets you do more damage to enemies under despair, which is exactly what Anubis is doing. Artemis is a slayer from the Olympus faction. We don't know much about her basic and her passive, but we do know her core and her ultimate. Her core attacks all enemies 3 times with a very high multiplier, and increases this hero's divinity by 1% for each enemy hit. So in wave content, you're getting 12% divinity from your core. The ultimate attacks one enemy and you increase the damage by 10% for each enemy defeated. You also gain 40 divinity when inflicting damage to an enemy and gain an additional 100 when defeating an enemy. So it's really clear that we want to be cycling turns and killing people. Now, the imprint says when defeating an enemy, the next attack will do increased damage. So we can assume that hers is just an improved version of that, maybe 50%. So legendary weapon wise, obviously Thunderbolt with the Wukong imprint is great. It will help you just give you more divinity gain and more turn meter to keep cycling back around and potentially get kills on the follow-up attack to then make her actual next turn do more damage. Mjolnir is also another option you could go with here. Every third hit deals more damage. Now, her core hits 3 times, so it'll make the third hit do more damage, giving you a better opportunity to kill someone. Now, I do believe best in slot is probably going to be Thunderbolt with Wukong or Golden Bow, but other epic options are. Divine Bow is very similar to Mjolnir. Additional hits do increase damage, so that's nice. Chillheart and Red Lust, every time you get a kill, you increase your divinity and turn meter. So we're already building on what the kit itself is trying to do. Sharur is similar to Thunderbolt in that you do more damage with follow-up attacks. So if you're going to pick Sharur, try and get a Wukong or a Xolotl imprint with it. When it comes to legendary imprints for Artemis, Camazotz I quite like. When you crit, you still turn meter. You're going to be building her with crit. She is a damage dealer, so you're just going to get value from there. Talalok is quite nice. When you do damage, you have a chance to do extra damage out. Her core is a multi-hitting AoE, so potential for lots of scatter damage there, albeit probably minimal scatter damage. Freya, when you crit, you heal. That's exactly what she's going to be trying to do anyway. And Oda Nobunaga increases your damage on kills. So again, we're just building on what the kit is already trying to do. When it comes to epic imprints, Osiris and Xolotl are just nice. I also like Nazar. When you take your turn, you sacrifice some of your HP to do more damage, just making it more likely for you to get the value out of her imprint and gain that divinity. When it comes to rares, Tengu and Nitocris are quite nice, but I also like Ulfhednar as well. I think that's a solid choice for this Slayer. Next up, we have Athena. She is our first tank unit so far. So she's got a defense aura. Her core places a shield equal to her defense and reduces the damage they take, stacking up to 3 times, giving you more value out of that shield the more you cast it. And then her ultimate is an AoE, and you increase the damage of the next ultimate by 3%, each time an ally under a shield is attacked. Her imprint says when an ally under a shield is attacked, there is a 35% chance to place a petrify. So her passive is probably 70%, I would guess, because it's double the imprint. When it comes to legendary weapons, then we're going to want to pick support-leaning weapons. Aegis is one example, particularly for PvP, always reflecting the first disable she receives, and then giving her a chance to reflect them from then onwards. I like it because that shield's going to be really important, so her being able to cast it by not being disabled is good. You've then also got the likes of Forge Fire just to keep her up for longer, although it's not one I would necessarily recommend. Obviously, Heatle if you can start to level it up. And then for lols, you could go Namsaru. Her ultimate's already got damage stacking, and she's defense based, so she's going to be naturally tanky. So a Namsaru could be a fun thing to do. She won't receive the buffs, but she will gain stacking damage from the weapon on top of the stacking damage from her own ultimate ability, and then potentially hit for a very large number in Magical Christmas Land, although I do not recommend it. Thunderbolt and Wukong is obviously an option. Best in slot's quite a hard one. I don't think there is a definitive one. An argument could be made for all of them. For me, if I could get it to level 6 very quickly, I think I would go to Heatle, failing that Spartan Shield. When it comes to imprints, then the obvious choice for me, particularly from a legendary standpoint, is Tian Long, increasing the damage allies under shield do and decreasing the damage they take. When it comes to epics, there's a few that I quite like. Brand's quite nice because it brings the heat onto her. You could go with Geri. Gog Magog increases her own defense and resistance. And then, of course, you've got Green Knight and Osiris. Rare imprint wise, you could go for Ankesnaman, Hippolyta, to if you got like an Olympus themed team, Shishi, and Sean ones. Next up is Cizin, another Slayer. Now, he reminds me a bit like Theodore from Raid. So his core ability attacks all enemies with a 75% chance to place Blaze 2. And then his ultimate attacks all enemies and will activate Acid and Blaze on each target. Will also apply, well, I presume accuracy up on himself for one turn. His divinity generator is 50 divinity when doing damage to an enemy under acid or blaze. Now his imprint says he inflicts 15% more damage with attacks when attacking enemies under blaze. So he's very much all about the dot effects. Now it might not be the best at level 1, but I believe the best weapon legendary wise for him is Aten. Now, if you can't get Aten, Diseased Claw is the next one. Those two are the best in slots for me. However, Aten would be my preference. You can also take the Crook to give you a little bit of dot explosion. However, I'm not sure how easy it is going to be to keep the uptime of these dots if you're blowing them up with Crook, which is why I lean to Aten or Diseased Claws. Imprint-wise, Morrigan for me is the best, I think. I'll die on that hill potentially, with a chance to extend the duration of those debuffs. If you pair that with Diseased Claws, you've got a chance to increase it by 2 turns, which just seems fantastic. Ra is an option for legendary. YDG, Egregok is another option for legendaries. When it comes to epic imprints, we have obviously Osiris. Persephone decreases their divinity when they gain a debuff, and we're obviously doing a lot of that with him. And then lastly, Polydnitsa. Now, Polydnitsa is a nice one too, giving a 20% increased critical damage when attacking enemies under blaze, and we are of course doing that, so top-notch imprint there. When it comes to rare imprints, then there's only really 2 to potentially talk about. That is Nitocris, but also Ramses. Ramses' imprint deals more damage to enemies under acid. Now, we don't know that acid is in his kit, but considering his ultimate requires him to blow it up, I think we could potentially assume that one of these green icons here, whether his basic or his passive, will have acid in there somewhere. So next we have Dracula. We do know his entire kit though. So his base attack attacks one enemy 2 times, has a chance to place a bleed, and it will also heal him by 5% of his HP. His core places 2 stacks of bleed on the enemy with a chance to remove a buff, and if a buff is removed, will place 3 stacks. It also grants him an extra turn, so the chance to place 5 bleeds in a core and basic rotation. His ultimate attacks all enemies 4 times. He will remove all of the bleeds to increase the damage by 8% per stack of bleed consumed, so potentially that could be 40 bleed stacks consumed if everyone has 10 and it's a wave fight. And then his imprint at the start of the turn, if an enemy's under a bleed, increase the damage of the hero's next attack by 5%. So, lots of debuffs, but a hint of damage in there too. So, just like Cizin, Aten is probably going to be the best legendary weapon for him, increasing the damage that those bleeds are going to do. Now, unlike Cizin, Disease Claws actually does nothing for him because bleeds don't have a duration. Once they're up there, they stay there, and Mend is the only way to remove them. So Crook could be good, again, blowing up 1 bleed. If you can keep that rotation going and keep the bleeds up there long time, Crook might be nice. Imalu, obviously, damaging ultimate. Now, the last one is Tech Paddle. Now, Tech Paddle's a weird one. It is very low value, but is an option. Now, Tech Paddle says you convert 10% of the healing received into damage on your next attack. Now, that is healing received, so you've had to physically receive it. And Drac heals by 5% on his basic. So let's say you've got 6k health. 5% of that will be 300. 10% of that 300 is 30. It's nothing to write home about, but if your choice is that or the epic weapon that works with reviving, then Tech Paddle could give you some value, although it is very small. Imprint wise, Grendel's quite nice. Again, the lower your HP, the more initiative and speed that you get could be good. Vivian's nice, increasing the damage of your basic attacks, and obviously will be doing a lot of those. And then Pazuzu I quite like. Now, Pazuzu lets you cut in if someone places 3 buffs in a turn. His core removes a buff, so potentially you're going to sort of devalue the enemy and what they're trying to do by cutting in with Pazuzu. Epic imprint wise, Achilles increases the damage, but you take more. You've obviously also got Osiris. Persephone we've spoken about. When you place a debuff, you decrease their divinity, which is just very nice, especially with the amount of bleeds that we are putting out there. Freki is a nice one. You heal by 15% of the damage inflicted when hitting an enemy under bleed, and the bleeds do more damage. So Freki imprint on an Aten will be very good in scaling the damage that they do long term. Thorkel is another interesting one. You gain effects based on the amount of bleed stacks out there. 5 stacks is 10% damage. 10 stacks is you steal turn meter on attack. And 20 stacks you receive less damage from them. So that's going to be better in wave content. Freki's going to be better in single target or boss content. When it comes to rares, Lady Shock imprint, Nitto Chris, Tengu. But for me, I think, best in slot will be Aten with Freki, I think will be my choice. Next up, we have Freya. Her core equalizes one ally's turn meter to the enemy with the highest turn meter, then it increases the turn meter of all allies by 20%. Also permanently increases this hero's healing by 5%. Now, this is both good and bad. You want Freya to go last in your team because she equalizes the turn meter. So if your ally is faster than the enemy and she goes before them, you're actually going to reduce your ally's turn meter. Her ultimate places attack up and sharpen on all allies for 2 turns. She'll then attack one enemy, followed by attacking all enemies, increasing the attack and crit damage of each ally by 10%. Gains 30 divinity when healing an ally. She is a Slayer's wet dream. This is awesome. And her imprint says when this hero inflicts a critical hit, heal by 1200% of her initiative. Now, chat in the Discord suggests that imprints that say this hero means the actual unit says allies. So potentially this says when allies inflict critical hits, she heals them. If that is the case, this is sublime. So what are we looking to put on her? Well, Excalibur is the obvious choice because she does place some buffs. They are on her ultimate, so how often you get that, I don't know, but I think Excalibur trumps everything else. Epic options, Imalu, once again, obviously, because it does damage. Galantine is an option. Galantine says, heal this hero when you place a buff on an ally, so you're going to give her her own self-sustain through that ultimate. And then you've also got Grail, which just increases all outgoing healing in general. When it comes to Imprints. There are a couple of options. Once again, Wukong is very good. Pazuzu is nice. If you are slower than the enemy, she'll get the opportunity to use her core and boost someone to overtake the enemy, and perhaps you can disrupt them in that way, which I think is quite nice. And then Yang Wang says whenever an enemy dies, increase her initiative, so that could be nice that way, increasing her heal and how often she gets her ultimate. Now, whilst the best in slot weapon is easily Excalibur, the imprint for me is up in the air. Mokosh says when a buff is expired or removed, you heal that ally by their max HP. She's got no healing that we know of at the moment outside of the critical hit on her passive, so this gives her some redundancy, which I quite like. Another epic imprint which gives redundancy is Xolotl. Now, Xolotl gives you a chance to follow up attack, but when you do, you heal allies when you do that. So that is another one that I really like, and I think it's between these two epic imprints outside of Pazuzu maybe, which may be the best for her. Moving on to rares, then lastly, Orpheus and Vesna. Orpheus says has a 20% chance to increase the divinity of all allies by 25 when she places a buff on them. Happy days. And then Vesna says for each buff on the ally, you increase the healing output she has. So again, just works great with what her kit is trying to do. Next up, we have Grendel. Now, Grendel is another brawler, kind of similar to Anubis in a way. Again, we don't know his basic, but his core attacks all enemies with a chance to place Despair. His ultimate attacks all enemies, instantly defeating heroes under 20% max HP. Doesn't affect bosses. You then increase his HP by 5%, stacking up to 6 times for each enemy defeated. You gain 40 divinity when attacking an enemy. And in his imprint, I'm going to put on screen as well. For every 20% HP he is missing, you increase your speed and initiative by 5%. So for him, it's likely going to be either 10% or the HP threshold is going to be lower. But I think it's going to be 10%. Now, this is what we're going to be focusing our build on. Now, he's going to get faster and more ultimate meter the lower his HP is. So for me, the best legendary weapon for him is Forge Fire, giving you that damage reduction. For epic weapon wise, you've obviously got Imalu once again. You've got Huntress, so similar to Anubis. When we place that Despair, we're going to reduce their turn meter. Then you've also got Cursed Blade. Now, Cursed Blade says you steal divinity when you're attacking enemies under Despair. Now, it does mean you have to use your abilities kind of in the wrong order. You'd use your core first and then your ultimate after. But you're going to come back around to that ultimate again, giving you more opportunities to get the execute off. When it comes to legendary imprints, we're going to be executing people, all right, potentially. So things like Anubis and Oda Nobunaga and Artemis, which work when someone dies, will all work very nice. Again, if you've got Huntress, you've also got Perrin, just to increase your turn meter once again. You've then got Hercules and Wukong. Now, Wukong, I think, is going to be the best for him. So there is an argument to take Thunderbolt as a weapon, but Wukong gives you Immortal. It doesn't heal you, so you'll be at 0, which means you're going to get your max possible speed and initiative increase, which is amazing. In a similar vein to that, you then got Nezza. Now, Nezza sacrifices a percentage of your HP to increase your damage. When you sacrifice your HP, you might then go below the next 20% HP threshold, increasing your speed and divinity as well, which is quite nice. And then Polyphemus, you deal more damage to enemies under disables, which is just lovely. When it comes to rare options, Eurydice, when an enemy with a disable takes turns, you decrease their divinity. Great stuff. Vidar would be quite nice as maybe like a campaign farmer sort of thing. You increase your max HP each time an ally dies. You're increasing your max HP, but you're not healing, so you're going to increase that threshold, potentially getting another stack of that 20% passive thing. And then Volkodlak, increased damage to enemies under Despair. Next up, we have Hades. Now, I've not seen anyone pull a Hades, but I'm going to go over him quickly anyway. If you do pull a Hades, though, I recommend moving on from Hades as much as you can. His core, attack all enemies with a chance to place Despair and lock ultimate. His ultimate attacks all enemies 2 times. The first attack will decrease their turn meter. The second attack will place speed down. It will also play initiative down if they're under curse. Gain 40 divinity when attacking enemies under a curse. His passive says, at the start of his turn, place curse for 1 turn on the enemy with the highest attack. When an enemy under curse is defeated, you then place curse on the next highest attack. Okay. What I don't like about him is the single target curse and the way that it works with his abilities, but that's by the by. Legendary weapon wise, I think Aegis is probably the best one for him. He is a disruptor, so that means you don't want him under any kind of CC. So I think Aegis is the best legendary weapon for him. When it comes to epic weapons, Imlu, once again, fine. Disease Clause is good to increase the duration of those curses and the lock ultimates, buying you an extra turn or two. And then Huntress and Cursed Blade for their synergy with disables. Huntress decreasing the turn meter, Cursed Blade stealing divinity when attacking them under despair. Legendary imprint suggestions, probably the Morrigan once again, just because of the synergy with the debuff extension that we can get. Heron is another one, but for me, Morrigan seems like the clear and obvious choice. Obviously, let me know if you think I'm missing anything. When it comes to epic imprints, then Polyphemus, more damage to dealing to enemies under disables, and Persephone, when you place a debuff, you steal the divinity, and he's going to be doing that with his curse. And then lastly, when it comes to rares, Eurydice, they reduce the turn meter when they take a turn under a disable. Nitocris, and then Volkodlak, more damage once again to enemies under disables. Heimdall then, one of the easiest units to talk about and most people's top choice for the Godforge quest event. His basic attacks one enemy with a chance to transfer a random debuff. If it is a blaze, an acid, or a bleed, it will activate that debuff. Do bear in mind you need accuracy though. His core places retaliate and intercept on all allies before attacking all enemies. That is essentially a counterattack, and then intercept, you absorb the first instance of damage on that ally. So sort of like a mini ally protect. And then on top of that, his ultimate places defense up on all allies, a shield on all allies, and then places protect on all allies as well. So like another layer of ally protection there, or what you would more commonly know it as. His passive, then, if he is under a buff, there is a chance to reflect any debuff received. Again, requiring accuracy, but this man really does do it all. So what are we putting on him then? Obviously Excalibur, just due to the number of buffs he's putting out there. This is the best in slot. For PvP, you could argue Aegis, just to make sure he gets those protection spells and abilities off. But for me, Excalibur, without a shadow of a doubt. Epic weapon-wise, you shouldn't be picking any of these really, but you could go for Unk to increase the shield that he's going to get. Fangshin Huaji reduces the AoE damage he takes. Galantine heals him whenever a buff expires, which could be good for a self-sustain point of view. Cladonet's reducing the enemy's attack. Naginata increasing counter-attack damage. Spartan Shield to increase his defensive aura. When it comes to legendary imprints, Tianlong is the best in slot here as well, but an argument is there to be made for Athena's imprint for a PvP standpoint. Allies under a shield are attacked, he can place Petrify on them. So it's between those two, but for me, Tianlong is the obvious choice. Epic imprint wise, similar to Athena that we spoke about earlier, Bran, because it's like he takes 10% of the damage that the allies take, and they're already under a protect and things, so it's okay, but it's going to bring him a lot of heat. Gogmagog increasing his defense and resistance when he's attacked. Green Knight to reflect the damage, and Osiris once again. And then Unkhesinaman, or Pharez, Unkhesinaman, Ceridwen, Hippolyta, Shishi, and Sean one would be some potential options for you. And then the last one for today, Hell, one of the more divisive units from Alpha, mainly because of her ultimate. I personally love it, and it's going to absolutely shine in the Desecrated Daimyo. 30% attack aura, basic attacks one enemy with a 75% chance to spread curse onto a random enemy. Her core is an AoE with a chance to place curse. Then her ultimate revives all defeated enemies with 10% HP and places confuse on them which can't be resisted. If it targets a boss, then it simply places defense down, which is quite nice. And then her passive, when an ally or enemy is revived, increased its hero's attack by 10%, stacking 10 times. Potentially very strong unit, particularly in wave content. So what would I do with her then? Well, she's a damage dealer, so Golden Bow is going to be the best in slot, possibly. But if you want some protection, something like a Forge Fire or an Aegis will do just fine. Epic weapon-wise, Golden Bow is obviously the best in slot. Spartan Shield's also very nice because of her attack aura. You're going to be killing a lot of things, so you will get value from Red Lust, Chill Heart, for example, but I don't recommend it. One interesting one, though, is Bone Scythe. Now, Bone Scythe says you deal up to 30% increased damage to enemies below a certain HP threshold, starting at 15, going up to 33. When you revive someone with your ultimate, they're going to be at 10% HP, so you're going to get automatic value from the Bone Scythe. So in the Daimyo, when you res the enemies, you need to kill them quick to increase the boss's ult meter and drain it at the same time. Bone Scythe could be a nice option early on if you don't have Golden Bow, but Golden Bow would be my top choice. When it comes to legendary imprints, there's a few to consider. You've got the Morrigan for the increased curse duration, Hades just to randomly put a curse out to get the ball rolling. Then you've got things like Anubis and Artemis, which care about killing things, giving you turn meter and things like that. Oda Nobunaga, when you kill something, you gain a stack of damage, which is quite nice. Epic choices, Green Knight is good. Polyphemus is nice when you're attacking the enemies under Confuse for increased damage. Persephone, Steel Divinity when you place Curse. Osiris and Xolotl once again. And then rare choices. Cyclops I quite like reducing the damage you take from crits. She's a very squishy unit, so that'll be nice. Maria Marevna, if they're buffed up, you're going to do more damage. Nitocris and Tengu. And there we are. So that is the first half of the units done in this video. Part 2 will go over the other half. Obviously, there are some that are still a mystery to us, like Apollo, like Lamashtu, so there will likely be a third installment when we know about those. Second part isn't going to be tomorrow. New Year's is going to be more of like a reflection kind of thank you video, which I've already done. So maybe another week tops before the next part comes out. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Take care, look after yourselves, work hard, but as always, play harder. I will see you in another one soon. Cheers.